guys, I'm back for the second installment of my Q&A series, where I answer your questions and give my best input and advice about art from my own experiences. Regarding the last Q&A's final question, I was really happy to read and respond to all of your comments about your reasons for drawing, and I was really surprised to see the variety of responses. Some people had a pretty emotional connection with drawing, while others just did it for the fun of it, but I could relate to a little bit of everyone's reasons, and I think it's really important, especially for you guys, to see other people's opinions about certain topics, rather than always taking mine for word, and you might find something more applicable to you. So for this Q&A drawing, I did some fan art of the character Inga from one of my favorite animes, Ungo, in Inga's regular and transformed forms, so they are the same character. And if you haven't seen Ungo, I highly recommend it. If you're a fan of Death Note, I think you would really like this anime, since it's a mystery investigation type of anime with some supernatural elements. And when I first started it, the beginning was just a little bit slow, but it gradually got way more interesting and later on too addicting for just 11 episodes. And if you are going to start watching it, I suggest you start at episode 0, or else you're going to miss some pretty crucial information that happens later on in the series. So on to the questions. My first question is, what paper do you use and is it bleed proof? I've recently just changed my paper game. I've still stuck with the same brand, which is Recollection's cardstock brand, but I've been using the different colors instead of just the white, and I've been using the cream and the brown shades. And I've discovered that you can get some really cool effects with this paper, which I'll probably show in a future video. But this paper is not bleed proof. It does bleed a little bit at the bottom, but it's not too thick and it's not too thin. It's just medium weight paper that works really well with my Copics. This paper doesn't bleed too much for me. It absorbs the ink fairly well, and it's actually not very expensive. But it does bleed through some if you have a really juicy or new marker, but that's just to be expected from pretty much any marker paper. The type of paper that I recommend for Copics is paper that's not too thick or too thin. If the paper's too thick, it could absorb way too much of your ink, or it could just pile up on the surface and get kind of gross and sticky. Or if your paper's too thin, it'll just bleed right through your paper. So try to find a paper that's a happy medium. My next question is, how long does it usually take you to finish a piece of art? This definitely varies, depending on how detailed the drawing is, or how difficult a certain medium is to work with in achieving something, but I'd say definitely over 8 hours per drawing. I usually like to spend a lot of time on my drawings, just to leave room for experimentation and trying to get things exactly as I would like them. But the longest I usually go is max 5 days, with some time breaks in between. My next question is there any media that you're bad at? And this person asked it as a joke, but I find that working with oil paints and using 3D media like clay is actually pretty challenging for me. I've done a lot of practice with oil paints, but I don't think I'm good enough to actually film a video of me using them. But because oil paints don't dry very quickly, and they're sort of hard to manipulate and layer the way you want them to, and because you have to wait long periods of time in between for drawing and adding more layers, it makes it a pretty tricky media to work with. But maybe one day I'll take it seriously and actually learn the proper basics of using oil paints, because they can be a pretty challenging media to use if you haven't had any prior experience or formal instruction, and the different techniques that you can learn from them are ones that are hard to teach yourself. So you're not going to get that Leonardo da Vinci sort of airbrush look all of a sudden. As for clay, I was never really that good at using like 3D media ever since I was young, or at least not as good as I am at like 2D, but I have some pretty decent skills, and I'm actually pretty good at working with metal, like metal wire to make sculptures and jewelry, and actually on the side I do make some DIY rings and necklaces. My next question is, what pens do you line your work with? And I always use Prismacolor multiliner pens in 005, which is 0.05 millimeters. And right now you can see me use the purple multiliner, and I have multiliners in the colors black, blue, purple, green, red, orange, brown, and sepia. I think using colored multiliners can add some really cool effects to your drawings, and the reason why I usually stick with Prismacolor is because I find that they usually have the most sturdy multiliners. Like, I've used the Microns and the Staedtlers and the Copic brand. Not saying anything bad about these brands, I still really like to use them and I still use them. But I've had a few instances where their nibs have broken and some of their ink runs out a little bit quicker than I expected. But for me, Prismacolor is just more durable. And I know a lot of people have said that their ink doesn't work really well with using markers, but I personally have no trouble. I usually wait maybe like 3 minutes for it to dry, and the ink doesn't bleed or budge out of the lines for me. My next question is, what did you use to make the smoky background? And they're referring to my Golden Eyes video. And what did you do to achieve it? So the first thing that I did was I took this black pastel stick and I also took a black charcoal stick. You could pretty much use either one. I just used both in conjunction, and I shaded in one layer all over the paper, kind of making sure that I didn't touch the main subject of the picture. And I just used my fingers to blend it all out and make sure that the surface was all even and just completely black. And then I took my vinyl eraser. It's basically just a really white and soft eraser, and then I tried to mimic the movements of smoke. And you could use a reference for this. I kind of just, of course, went with it because I'm not really one to use references a lot. And I just tried to make like a smoky effect in the background with my eraser, just by rubbing it in. So after you do this, this should be your first layer of smoke. And next I took this paintbrush and I kind of just sweep the excess powder, like charcoal powder, from the background and covered up the smoke lightly. So you keep repeating this process, making sure that each successive layer of smoke is a little bit brighter than the next. So your topmost layer of smoke should be the brightest. And that's basically how I got my effect. If you guys would like to see me do a demo of this, just comment below or like this video and we'll see if that might happen in the future. The last question is, what do you look like? And if you want to see what I look like, just go on my DeviantArt profile and a pic of me will be there. So my final question for you guys is, how do you define a great piece of art? I know this is a question I already answered on my last Q&A, but I'd love to read your responses to this, so comment down below. Thank you guys so much for watching this Q&A. I'll probably have the second part of this video out next week showing my coloring process, and hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye!